The Metro Division is a mix of veteran teams, youthful teams, and teams that are up and coming. This is going to be Coach Ryan D's final video in our 4-part series, tier ranking all of the NHL teams within their division. So why are the Carolina Hurricanes, Pittsburgh Penguins, Washington Capitals, New York Rangers, and the young upstart teams like the Devils, the Blue Jackets, and then maybe a few outliers like the New York Islanders and the Philadelphia Flyers ranked where they're ranked? Here's why. As always, our tier ranking is a 5-tier system, starting with the division winner. Then we take a look at those that can be 2-3 contenders. Then we take a look at those that are 4-5 wild cards. From there, it's the wild card bubble teams that could sneak in and surprise us. And finally, it's the Bedard sweepstakes this year. Before we get into our rankings, smash like, hit that notification bell. If you've been here before, you know Coach Ryan D is the best in hockey content right now. Let's go ahead and thank all of our members as well from the coach's staff. Big shout out to all of you for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel, click the join button down below. But if you want to support the free way, the old way, the classic way, the old thumbs up and the subscribe button is the way to go. Getting in touch with Coach Ryan D is through Discord. Starting within the Bedard sweepstakes, it's the Philadelphia Flyers. They're either a fan favorite or they are a fan nightmare. If you are a fan of Philly, you are a diehard fan of this game because the Philadelphia Flyers have one of the most ravenous fan bases in the NHL, but times have been tough for the Flyers lately. There's been a few messes, in my opinion, in the head office. Ron Hextall's out. He's moved over to the rival Pittsburgh Penguins, and when we take a look at the Broad Street Bullies here, things don't look good for Philly. Sean Couturier will be out at least half of the year with a back injury at this point. He may or may not return, but that leaves them without a true number one center. And Ryan Elias, one of their stud defensemen back there, one of the best to do it in the NHL, will not be with them to start the season at all this year. He may be out for a lengthy period of time, such as half the season to the full season as well too. And without two key players like Couturier and Ellis, I have this team in the basement of the NHL. Will they be dead last? Likely not, but they will be in the bottom 5. In my opinion, it'll be last in this division. When we take a look at the rest of the roster, you're really going to be looking at Kevin Hayes to carry most of the workload for the Philadelphia Flyers, and let's be honest, his best days were with the New York Rangers. Even his small stint with the Winnipeg Jets during their playoff push wasn't ideal, so he hasn't been all that's been advertised for Philadelphia, especially with that $7 million a year contract. There's a new toy on the back end here in Philly as well too, and that is Tony DeAngelo. He comes over from the Carolina Hurricanes, one of the most prolific goal-scoring defensemen in the NHL. He was ranked extremely high in our model of top defensemen this year. We all know that Tony DeAngelo comes with locker room concerns, and that can really derail a team. We also know DeAngelo isn't the most well adapted on defense, even though he's a defenseman. He is an offensive powerhouse and juggernaut, though, and he's going to join the top 4 that likely is going to feature Ivan Provorov, who is still a solid defenseman in his own right, still very young. Travis Sinham enters into the top 4 along with Ramus Ristolainen. Cam York is going to join the back end there. The young, unproven defender should have some chance to be able to bolster his prowess within the NHL. And then will Carter Hart finally, for Pete's sakes, finally emerge as the goaltender he was always meant to be. He's had flashes of brilliance, but hasn't really been able to sustain it through an entire season. This was supposed to be the next Carey Price, but we've seen everything but that from Carter Hart yet. However, there's still more time for this goalie to develop, so let's see if he can take another step forward in 2022-2023. Regardless of my opinion on this roster, I think it's pretty clear to say that these guys are going to likely be in the basement of this division. I don't see any swings that they can take that are going to move them above the 8th or even 7th position in a crowded Metro. Moving on to the wild card bubble, there are 3 teams. Oh boy, there are a lot of teams to talk about here. We got the New Jersey Devils, the New York Islanders, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. There's potential in all 3 of these teams, so if you're a diehard fan of one of these teams, don't think this is a snub. Sure, 1 or 2 of them could be in the 4-5 wildcard bubble spot, but the reason they're all down here in the wildcard bubble, I don't know which one to put in there. It's a crowded backfield, and any single one of these teams could actually end up making the playoffs this year, but I think it's unlikely with the 4 other teams that are in front of them. But anything can happen in the NHL, and they all have competent rosters that have a chance to do it. They're just not as deep as their counterparts that I have in the top four. I have it ordered as the New Jersey Devils having the best chance to come out of this cluster at the bottom and make the playoffs. Then I have the New York Islanders. And ever since the departure of Barry Trotz, they've taken a step backwards. They still have all the talent they had before. You know I love Matthew Barzal, but at the end of the day, Barry Trotz was the engine that made this team hum. And then the Columbus Blue Jackets with Johnny Gaudreau. I don't think the roster is quite strong enough in order to compete even with Gaudreau, but there is a chance for Columbus as well. So let's go ahead and dissect the rosters. Starting with Columbus, their likely first line is going to feature Boone Jenner, Patrick Laine, and Johnny Gaudreau. It's worth talking about this because Gaudreau is one of the better defensive forwards in the NHL, but that is under Daryl Sutter, and that is with Matthew Tkachuk and Elias Lindholm. And let's be frank, Boone Jenner is no Elias Lindholm. There is no number one center on this team, no matter whether it's Cole Sillinger, no matter whether it's Jack Roslovic. There's no number one center on this team that has the potential to be Elias Lindholm. And when you are a winger, you don't drive your line. Your centerman does. Boone Jenner just isn't there. Can Johnny Gaudreau, can Johnny Hockey go ahead and be one of those few wingers in the NHL, a la an Alexander Ovechkin, that can drive his line and carry it forward, especially on the defensive end of the puck? Patrick Laine joins him, and he's a prolific goal scorer. Gaudreau's a really nice passer, even though he is also known for scoring goals. Can he feed and reignite Patrick Laine, who comes in at his $8.7 million deal? The knock on Laine has always been his transition play, his two-way play, as well as his defensive play. So Gaudreau being a transition monster and playing with speed, I'm concerned with his decision, let's say, to sign with this team, because I don't see Laine or Jenner having that transition speed that Gaudreau has, but we'll have to take a look and see. The other notables on forward here are going to be Kent Johnson. He's right now slated to play on left wing. He does have center experience under him. Will they end up moving him to the center hole? I'm not too sure. I do think he's going to live organically on the wing, but he does have the ability to move into the middle of the ice. Kent Johnson is full of talent. He's full of speed, and he's a really good player that's going to partner, I think, in the future with a Johnny Gaudreau, because when I'm thinking of transition and skill, I think of Johnson and Gaudreau right away beside each other. But Johnson's very young, and he's going to need seasoning at the NHL level coming out of college. Cole Sillinger's in the same spot. Could he actually end up growing into the number one center of this team? For sure. Will he do it this year? Likely not, but we're going to have to wait and see how these forwards end up doing for Columbus. Either way, with Johnny Hockey re-signing, it's an exciting roster now. On the back end, Zach Werenski, the perennial all-star. This guy is an absolute monster back there. He didn't make my top 30 defensemen this year, but he has the previous 2 years before. He is always in contention to be one of the better defensemen in the NHL, and they're going to go ahead and carry a top six that is not going to be very well known to most players outside of the Columbus area. Jake Bean is on this roster as well. Erica Branson is on this roster as well, but they're likely going to play in a 5-6 or at highest a 3-4 role for this team. But overall, when I look at this roster, I just don't see the horsepower required for them to make the playoffs in a crowded Metro division. The New York Islanders are only one season removed from back-to-back conference finals. We all know that they have one of the deeper center cores in the NHL. No superstars outside of Matthew Barzal, and I do believe Barzal is an absolute superstar at the position, two-way player and a monster in the league. But when we take a look at Brock Nelson and Pajot, these guys end a nice 1-2-3 for this unit and for this team. So Anthony Beauvillier, Kyle Palmieri, Anders Lee, one of the most unknown captains in the NHL, even though he plays for a New York team, and Josh Bailey all round out this top six. It's a group of veterans that we all know very well that can play very well in front of one of the best fan bases in the NHL, at least one of the best fan bases in terms of having fun. This team is relatively deep actually in their middle six and back six as well too. I like the idea that you have a guy like Cal Clutterbuck, Cody Cizikas, or any of the other guys that you see noted here on this roster. It is a deep forward lineup. There's no real holes, but there's no real superstars outside of Matthew Barzal right now at this point too. So these guys could definitely make the playoffs, but I think it's going to come down to system and coaching. When without Barry Trotz there, we're going to have to see if these guys can climb the rankings this year. Slow start last year, but they did have a much better finish to the year. If they can build off that, they should be all right. In net, it should be Elias Sorokin's net. I think the battle is long over between Sorokin and Varlamov. Sorokin is one of the best goalies in the NHL today. He's in the top 10, at least in my opinion. And then their back end, their top six for defenders. We all know about Pelech and Pollock, two of the most underrated defensive pairings in the league. Adam Pelech, well known and starting to gain the respect he has deserved for years at shutting down the team's best, like Sidney Crosby, like Alex Ovechkin. He is one of the best shutdown defensemen out there, and his partner Ryan Pollock is very good as well. Noah Dobson's going to take a huge step forward. I had Noah Dobson in my top 30 NHL defenders this year. I took Werenski out. I put Dobson in. Dobson gets a new bridge deal this year. I wouldn't have bridged him. I would have tried to pay him more if I was the Islanders, but hey, what do I know? I would have paid that bigger fee because I think this guy is going to blow the roof off the place and he's going to be worth $8 to $10 million at some point. If he's not, he's not. That's fine. I mean, you're taking a risk anytime you're signing a bridge deal. You're trying to lower your risk for a bad contract, but I always want those boom guys on my roster for 8 years, and I think Dobson's proven he can be that guy. But 1 more year, 2 more years won't really hurt this guy's future potential for money in the league, and he's only going to help the Islanders going forward. So if you're building from the net out, you got a good goalie, you got a great top 4 in your defensive core, you have shutdown and you have offense from there. So if you're building from the net out, this team can definitely make the playoffs. Their forwards are deep enough to do it. The question is going to come down to coaching and the crowded division that they're in. But if they make the playoffs, don't say, I didn't say they couldn't. I just have to rank these teams in some position, and right now I have the other teams above them. But every day is a new day, and every piece of information we get from the Islanders as they continue their march forward is a new piece of information to resort them or any other team. The New Jersey Devils, one of the most exciting teams to me in the NHL right now because there's so much potential in how these guys are going to go. Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, really nice 1-2 punch down the middle. Jack Hughes is one of the best players in the NHL now. He's had some great interviews, some great talks about the fact that when he started the league at 18, he really just wasn't ready mentally in his own head. But this guy went 101 for a reason. Nico Hischier went 101 for a reason. These guys can definitely be the future of carrying this team to playoff success. And when you add a veteran like Andre Palat to the team, that's only going to help young guys like this continue to build on their massive amounts of skill and go forward. Dawson Mercer is a really nice player to watch here. Will he crack the top 6 as a young player? I think for sure he has to. He had a strong enough year last year. This guy is going to be an absolute monster in the league, in my opinion. So 91 there is a guy I really want to watch along with his buddies. Hischier and Hughes. This is going to be a very interesting top 6. And then when you take a look at line 3, Thomas Tatar and Eric Holla coming over from the Boston Bruins are a really nice signing back there. I like the balance of this third line, and I see nothing wrong with the youth movement on the fourth line for this team. Looking on defense, you have Graves and Hamilton there up top. Hamilton's still one of the best right shot defensemen in the NHL. There's no reason we need to really talk about that guy. I think he's absolutely fantastic. And then when we take a look at the goaltending, you have Mackenzie Blackwood and Vitek Vanacek. This is one of those tandems where you're looking at it and going, this might be the biggest hole for the New Jersey Devils and what holds them back. I love Mackenzie Blackwood right now. I think he could be one of the better goalies in the NHL. Goalies can take till they're 27 to fully develop. So Mackenzie's still got some time to work on it. Then you've got the veteran in Vitek Vanacek back there. Anytime you have this 1A, 1B scenario where they're going to split games, I always get concerned because, yeah, you want to ride the hot hand, but I'd always prefer to have the stable starting goalie. And that isn't what the New Jersey Devils have this year, yet I believe they have the most boom-bust roster between the Jackets, between the Islanders, and, well, between themselves because we're comparing them. So I think they have the best chance to make the playoffs, but there is reason to talk about the Islanders. There's reason to talk about the Devils, and there's reason to talk about the Blue Jackets this year. Just an exciting division. Moving on to the wild card teams. I think this is going to be the Washington Capitals all day. I think this band may be aged, but I still think they're good. They're big, they're bad, they can beat you up, and they added Darcy Kemper in on the back end. Darcy Kemper is a massive goaltending upgrade for this team, and that is going to help them carry forward in a crowded Metro division. Taking a look at their defense as well, John Carlson is always in style as one of the best defensemen in the NHL. Orlov, Jensen, and Farabee joined John Carlson in the top 4, and I think that is a good enough top 4 to take you all the way to a Stanley Cup if you want to get there. They're a little bit of a dark horse team moving forward, but they are a good enough dark horse team to return back to the Stanley Cup, which they so recently won. Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, and Brown. Ovi is only still either maintaining or getting better with age. So I don't know what more you want me to say about Alexander Ovechkin other than he might be the greatest goal scorer of all time, and he may pass Wayne Gretzky in the next few years. He doesn't seem to have any signs of slowing down. So when they say Russian machine doesn't break, doesn't seem like it does when you're Alexander Ovechkin. You have Strome, Oshie, Mantha. Then you still have Johansson, Eller, and Sheary back there on the third line. This top nine is well balanced. There's very few holes on this top nine. The biggest question for the Capitals and their success when it comes to the playoffs this year, and we're only talking about regular season standings, which is why I have them in the wild card position, is going to be the return of Nicholas Backstrom and Tom Wilson. Those are two very difficult players to replace. However, Washington's top nine is still very stable. Tom Wilson tore his ACL in the playoffs last year. That's a 9 to 12 month recovery for a player, but a player that is that much of a beast, Tom Wilson should be able to return sooner than later, but everybody's knee is different. And then there's the mental mindset of being able to return. So Wilson's return looks to be about December or January, but he won't really mentally be back to 100% until he's ready to be back to 100%. And every player is going to be different on that. So as tough as we all know Tom Wilson is, you never know how a player feels testing that knee when returning back to hockey. Nick Backstrom ended up having hip surgery done, and the hip surgery that he ended up having done has retired many NHL players. So we are unsure if Nicholas Backstrom will be able to return to the Washington Capitals or the NHL at any period in time. He ended up having the surgery due to the pain that he was having, but with the hope that he would be able to return to the NHL because clearly he couldn't play through it anymore. Those could be two big blows, but if Nick Backstrom doesn't end up coming back this year or retires from the NHL due to this hip surgery, or Tom Wilson doesn't end up coming back at 100% soon enough this year, we could see the teams we just talked about, the Devils, the Blue Jackets, as well as the Islanders, flip and take this spot away from the Washington Capitals. So it's all going to depend on their health and how they can manage two of their top six forwards this year. Very similar position to what Boston is in, with Brad Marchand, Charlie McAvoy, and Matt Grzelcyk not being able to return until midway through the year as well. That leaves us in our 2-3 contender and our division winner, and I am not going to do what I did in the Atlantic and put Pittsburgh, New York, and Carolina all within the division winner bracket. I'm actually going to go ahead and split them up because I do think this is Carolina's division to lose. As much as I love Pittsburgh and as much as I love the New York Rangers and their Cinderella run last year, I still think this is Carolina's division. I think had they had Freddie Anderson back last year, they would have gone deeper into the playoffs, and Carolina only got better this year, in my opinion. So I have the Penguins and the Rangers battling for the 2-3 spot, and that doesn't mean either of them can't and won't win the cup this year. I just think they're much clearer to be in tier 2 and Carolina to be alone in tier 1 as the division winner. Starting with the ever popular New York Rangers, Kreider, Zibanejad, and possibly Alexis Lafreniere, if you speak the way I speak when we're here on this channel. I'm very interested to see if Lafreniere can end up moving up to the top line. Now, will the young French Canadian be able to return that 101 investment that they made on him? Maybe not at this point, but we still have time to see how he can do. Capo Caco needs to move into the top 6 this year as well, in my opinion. And Philip Hedl, I think Hedl is probably the most reliable player out of this group of 3. We know exactly what we're going to get. He's going to end up on the third line. He's going to be a very valuable third line center to this team. But can Capo Caco and Alexis Lafreniere, can he end up moving up to the top line? These are the big questions I have for the Rangers. I don't think it holds them back in any sense. There's a lot of room for this team to do a lot of line juggling, so I'm very excited for it. And obviously the addition of Vincent Trocheck is huge. That fills your number 2 hole that's going to be vacated by Andrew Kopp, who was so successful with this team this year. A team that I called pretenders a year ago because they were very thin going into the trade deadline has now really bolstered their roster, and with the extra year of time to let that kid line develop and improve, I think the top 9 here for the New York Rangers is not in doubt. This seems to be a much deeper team than what we saw at the start of last year. On the back end, there's never any question in the top 4 for defensemen, newly minted captain Jacob Trouba and Condré Miller. I love both of these guys. Miller took massive steps forward last year, so the young defenseman in Miller, I think he's going to be a stud in this league. And then when you take a look at the first line, Ryan Lindgren, never in doubt, one of the best deals at $3 million per year. Solid, steady Eddie back there, and Adam Fox being one of the most premier defensemen in the NHL gives you one of the best top 4s in the league. Then you go ahead and take a look at Jones and Schneider there on the back end. These guys are young. They're ready to develop. They're ready to take a step forward as well this year. And then Igor Shesterkin, the #1 goalie in the NHL. When you are building from the net out, this defensive pair, along with this goaltending, along with this depth of forward, really allows fans or pundits who believe that this team could even be a Stanley Cup favorite to not be so out in left field. I think there may be a very good chance that this team ends up in a conference final or a finals in the Metro Division. It's crowded. There's a lot of really good teams. But if you said, does this team have the horses to win the cup this year? I say they do. I think they're still a year or two away, in my opinion, but I still think the opening of their window, which opened last year in the playoffs, will be open for quite a long time for this team. And I think even though the window isn't fully open right now, it's still open enough that they can win a Stanley Cup. Counter to that is the Pittsburgh Penguins. This is a team that is not young. This is a team full of veterans, but this is a team full of very good, very, very good veterans. Crosby, like Ovechkin, really hasn't slowed down. Still one of the premier players in the NHL today. Jake Guentzel and Rickard Raquel, really nice addition to this top six for this Penguins team. Jason Zucker, Evgeny Malkin re-signed, and Brian Rust rounded out. I would have let Malkin walk, but hey, they wanted to pay their guys. They wanted to keep the band back together. McGinn, Carter, and Kapanen are still there on the third line, and then you still got Bluger and Archibald back there as well. The only one they really ended up losing was Evan Rodriguez. Up there on defense, Dumoulin and Letang, awesome 1 and 2 pairing there. Peterson and Petrie, the new toy coming over to Pittsburgh. Hey, why get younger when you can get older, right? Jeff Petrie has had some of the best years in the NHL with veteran teams like this. He was awesome for Montreal in their battle all the way to the cup, and he does awesome in a top 4 role when he's not asked to carry the #1 role, and that is what Tanger will do for the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the top 4 look great. Tristan Jarry, can he take a step forward? I think it's all going to hinge on the health of the Pittsburgh Penguins. With Jarry and DeSmith hurt last year, that really ended up hurting their chance in the playoffs. Never mind the Jacob Trouba hit to Sidney Crosby that took him out for a few games. I think if the Pittsburgh Penguins ended up getting through the New York Rangers and had healthy goaltending, they could threaten for the Stanley Cup. So this is a team very similar to the New York Rangers. If these veterans can stay healthy and in the team, they can end up winning a cup. Moving on to our division winner, we finally have the Carolina Hurricanes. This team is one of the best in the NHL, absolute S tier. Teravainen, Aho, and Jarvis. Svechnikov and newly minted signed Paul Stastny and Martin Necas. Look, Stastny is an amazing player. He's fantastic in the room, and at $1.5 million, this is a deal. This is a guy chasing a Stanley Cup, in my opinion. He's going to be a massive addition, along with Brent Burns on the back end here, to the Carolina Hurricanes. You need veteran guys like that in your room, and that's exactly what Burns and Stastny are going to bring. You still have, in my opinion, the best third checking line in the NHL. Fast, Stahl, and then Andre Kasha. Maybe he ends up joining one of the best checking lines I have just ever seen. These guys shut down some of the best on the Boston Bruins last year. So I think this is going to be a very, very talented team. And when you have a guy like Jesperi Kotkaniemi at $4.8 million on your fourth line, hey, he could take a big step forward this year. He's a big question I'll be watching. The Octopus, Jacob Slavin back there, one of the best defensemen in the NHL. I have him in the top 7 right now. Brady and Brett Pesce are 2 of the best 3-4 defensemen in the NHL. They can play 1-2 on many teams out there. So when I'm taking a look at this top 4, I love it. And then Freddie Anderson, if he doesn't end up injured, this team can go quite forward. Antti Raanta was an excellent goalie last year and one of the best backups in the NHL, but you really do need your premier goalie to carry you forward. I think this is a team that can end up threatening for the cup. So there you have it. These are my division rankings on the preseason, and this is the division I'm the least confident about. We have Carolina, Pittsburgh, and New York. Any one of those teams could win the division, but I do believe there's a tier break between Carolina, Pittsburgh, and New York. The Washington Capitals, health of Tom Wilson, health of Nick Backstrom, and health of that veteran team is really going to matter on whether or not this team holds their wild card position or moves up into a 2-3 spot. The wild card teams of the Devils, the Islanders, and the Blue Jackets could all threaten the playoff race this year and end up flipping into that top 4 position. We could even see 5 teams from this division making the playoffs. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. The only thing I'm sure of with this division is that the Philadelphia Flyers end up at the back end. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I want you to go check out our other videos on our other divisions, and I'm going to consolidate this list and show you my cup favorites in our next video. But we've broken down every division, and I really like to break down teams by division because, frankly, that's how the playoffs are ordered. So yes, there's going to be a lot of cup contenders and teams in the S tier or A tier this year, but they're going to come from the same division. You can really only have one team from each division get through the playoffs. So I hope you've enjoyed this series. Comment down below. Let me know how I got it right, how I got it wrong. Saucy, chirpy comments always welcome, and we'll catch you in the next one.